Welcome to the first informational session for the legal department at the Council for Military Spouse Clubs. My name is Amy Trask, and I'm the Council's Chief Legal Officer. Joining me today are a few members of our board. Two of our co-founders, Bobby Collins and Candace McPhillips, join us from the Executive and Finance departments, as well as Bree Hayhurst from our Finance department. Each of our respective departments face legal issues firsthand, so we join together today to help your club work through a web of state, federal, DoD, military branch, and military installation laws and requirements. Today, we will talk a little bit about the council, give you a quick crash course on nonprofit law, talk about what the council can do for your club, and how to become involved in the council.
My name is Bobby Collins, and I'm the council's CEO. The council's founding has a genesis in its legal department. Our co-founder, Candace McPhillips, and I were connected through the Military Spouse JD Network, also known as MSJDN. We worked for several years on a legal reference guide setting out state, federal, and installation requirements for military spouse clubs. Over the years, we worked through our own law firms to help many military spouse clubs answer quick questions, unravel complicated governance issues, and advise on operational pitfalls. Incorporating the work we had done with our clients, the end result was a comprehensive 60-page legal guide. But we knew the heart of our work was bigger than just legal issues. We needed to help broaden the scope of our expertise to other issues faced by military spouse clubs, which were operational in nature. When co-founders Candace McPhillips, Julie Tafalso, and I founded the council in 2021, we drafted a mission statement to help guide our expanded efforts. Now the council exists to train, educate, and provide resources to American military spouse clubs and their charitable nonprofits operating on military installations worldwide in order to preserve, perpetuate, and improve their governance and operations as nonprofit organizations. We wanted to form an organization which would help us help more military spouse clubs than any of us had the capacity to help by ourselves. We wanted to find other subject matter military spouses who were experts to help military spouse club leaders in turn help military spouses. In establishing our board and determining the most critical needs of military spouse clubs, we divided our board of directors into 10 different departments. Each department has a chief and is generally responsible for running the day-to-day affairs of the council with respect to that department, and a director who is generally responsible for communicating with member military spouse clubs as part of his or her department. When we elected our board members, we found that many applicants had expertise in several areas and could have easily found a place in several departments. As a result, the council finds it's easy to conduct information sessions like this one by sharing the expertise of other directors in different departments. Thank you for joining us today for the legal department's first informational session. While the four of us on this call are all attorneys, the materials produced by the council are for informational purposes only and not for the purposes of providing legal advice. You should contact your attorney to obtain advice with respect to any particular issue or problem, but the council may be able to provide you with a referral to your local bar association or pro bono legal organizations to help. So what types of information can we provide you with? We'll be taking the legal guide Candace and I developed and breaking it into several introductory courses for your club to work through. Don't worry, we're hoping to make each course under 20 minutes so they are easy to digest. And after producing these courses, we'll eventually make our way through more advanced topics and special circumstances for military spouse clubs. But let's start with a short crash course on nonprofit law for military spouse clubs.
Thanks, Bobby. This is Candace McPhillips, and I'm the Chief Financial Officer of the Council. Let's get started on a quick overview of nonprofit law. Oftentimes, people confuse nonprofits with tax-exempt entities. This is really a distinction of federal and state laws. Under state law, you can be a nonprofit if you are an unincorporated association or an incorporated nonprofit. Most military spouse clubs are unincorporated associations, but for a variety of reasons, including exposure to personal liability, that's not really ideal. While almost all military spouse clubs are nonprofits under state law, not all military spouse clubs have gone the extra step to become recognized as a federal tax-exempt organization. Only entities that have obtained tax-exempt status from the IRS are exempt from paying federal corporate income taxes. Once an entity obtains federal tax-exempt status, the entity can also determine if there is a separate requirement on their state to obtain state tax exemption. Under federal law, most military spouse clubs who have obtained tax-exempt status received one of three types of tax-exempt status: 501c3, 501c4, or 501c7. The most common status type we see are 501c3 charitable clubs or 501c7 social clubs. Contributions to 501c3 entities are tax deductible to the donor, and 501c3s must be organized for a charitable purpose. By contrast, 501c7 entities are not required to undertake charitable activities, and donations to 501c7s are not tax deductible to the donor. As noted in this slide, 501c4 status is not really ideal for military spouse clubs. 501c4 entities are generally homeowners associations, community sports leagues, and political action committees. And generally, contributions to 501c4 entities are not deductible to donors unless the donor is a business. Now, let's talk about what kinds of laws apply to military spouse clubs. Unfortunately, the laws applicable to their activities is more complicated than just state and federal law. Military spouse clubs need to comply with Department of Defense regulations, military branch regulations, and military installation regulations. It's very difficult to navigate all of these requirements properly without specialized knowledge or professional legal advice. The Council was created to provide content that will help your clubs understand how to comply with all of these requirements. So let's talk about a little bit why it's so difficult to run a military spouse club and be legally compliant. This chart looks very scary, probably to most of you, and it demonstrates just how complex it is to comply with all of the requirements imposed on nonprofits that operate in the military environment. Rest assured that we understand the headache of legal compliance for military spouse clubs. First, let's take a look at the gray boxes in this diagram. This shows generally the path of steps that a military spouse club will take to form and get running. The legal guide that Bobby and I put together maps out extensively each of these steps. Part of the problem in drafting the guide and working with military spouse clubs is that state, federal, DoD, military branch, and military installation regulation laws affect really different parts of this path, and sometimes in conflicting ways. It would make your head hurt if we released this legal guide all at once, and that's why we plan to put out a series of webinars and fact sheets to help clubs navigate these issues. So don't despair. The military spouse clubs can get help from the Council, and Amy is going to explain the courses that we have in mind.
You're on mute, Amy.
Our first course will cover the different types of state legal entities and how these are generally formed. We'll also cover applying for the federal EIN number and look at the difference between nonprofit and tax-exempt status. Aren't you curious to confirm what type of state entity your club is and whether you really are tax-exempt? We've worked with clubs that think they're one type of entity only to find out they're another. Our second course will cover the typical types of tax-exempt entities for military spouse clubs, how to apply for federal tax-exempt status. This is done by filing a Form 1023, 1023-EZ, or 1024, and general restrictions on tax-exempt entities like private inurement, using the club for personal gain, and restrictions on lobbying and political activities. Our third course will cover tax and regulatory compliance issues on the state and federal level. This subject seems to stump a lot of military spouse clubs. Have you ever wondered what types of federal tax forms you need to file? And do you know if your club is registered to solicit charitable donations in your state? Did you know there may be fines and penalties for not registering and completing annual reports? Bree and Candace and the finance department will be really helpful for this discussion. Our last introductory course will help tie all of these subjects together, in part because it affects almost everything military spouse clubs do. Do you know that military spouse clubs are subject to DoD regulations specific to your military branch, and military installation requirements? When was the last time someone from your club lined up all of these regulations to make sure you're complying with everything? We can talk through all of that. With any luck, the council will eventually work with each military branch to simplify, correct, and advance best practices from private organizations as part of revisions to these regulations. Does this sound of interest to you? We'll be looking for a director of military installations as part of our upcoming board elections.
Hi, this is Bree Hayhurst, and I'm the Director of Finance and Accounting. After completing these first 4 introductory courses, the Council's legal department will next turn to more advanced topics. These topics are very likely to interact with the Spouse Club's finance department. We will explore unique issues for Oconus military spouse clubs, like the Status of Forces Act, also known as SOFA. We'll also cover issues for some military spouse clubs who may discover that their tax-exempt status was lost as a result of their failure to file annual tax forms or a revocation by the IRS. We'll also cover some of the basics of changing your 501c4 club into becoming a 501c3 or 501c7. Finally, we'll cover a sticky issue if you find you're a combined social and charitable club with 1 board of directors and best practices for separating your tax-exempt activities. If this information session has piqued your interest, let's talk about how your club can be involved with the council. First off, you have your club become a member. We offer free membership until May 2022 while the council builds its library and resources. You can find the application on our website, as well as additional details if you'd like to become a founding member. You can help us help you by participating in committee meetings and responding to surveys. You'll receive an introductory survey shortly after joining, which will help us gather empirical data about military spouse clubs. You can also attend departmental committee meetings held quarterly. Aren't you curious to actually speak with other military spouse clubs globally to discuss and tackle current issues within your leadership role with the guidance of subject matter expert military spouses? We'll be posting the 4 legal department introductory courses in the council's library, along with other resource materials as they become available too.
Thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video. The Council for Military Spouse Clubs looks forward to serving the military spouse community by educating, training, and providing resources to your local military spouse club. If you have more questions, please email us at contact@councilformsc.org or visit us on the website at www.councilformsc.org.